So to answer your question, how have I created transparency? I think first thing is, like you said, making work visible. In my eyes, if things aren't ticketed, they're not valued. And so this used to be a big challenge for one of my teams. And, I told my team, hey, like, I'm not trying to make a ticket out of everything, but you did a lot of good stuff. It seems that, maybe you spent 2 days trying to help out this like emergency situation on the side. We just need to know what that is as a team. It's not about, being obsessive. It's about capturing those things so that we know what we can achieve over the sprint. So first, just really helping the team understand what we're trying to get out of by visualizing our work, right? What is the whole point behind transparency? I have a data scientist in my team, and we don't always have work defined for him during like the actual planning due to the nature of his work. Like there are different data products models that need monitoring like throughout the day, and it usually occurs in the background. So, based on like the urgency of thing, and he kind of brings in work into the sprint. And one of the things that I used to struggle with in the beginning was he would bring in work to the sprint without like any estimation or discussion with like the rest of the team. And so, I had to encourage this person and send a reminder multiple days in a row until eventually he could see how his lack of transparency hurt the team from like not even being able to finish the sprint, right? And so sometimes teams have to live the consequences of not having enough transparency and learn from it. So you really want to make sure the teams understand what it means to be transparent, like I said, right? And work with them to help them understand maybe how their current situation or behavior doesn't live up to maybe the level of transparency that the team needs in their work, right? So that's super important. And other thing that I like to do is when I'm working with teams to bring like that more transparency, is I help create a board that can actually provide valuable information to others. So sometimes a team will have a very generic board that's not meaningful to their work at all. And so as I start to learn about the team's process, I come to find out if the visual board is of any good use and whether it allows to highlight tasks that are blocked where the team isn't maybe making any progress, right? And
so do you do that like physically in the Jira board? Like, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I will hold maybe during retro, I ask my team, hey, it seems that maybe our setup, our current board doesn't reflect our definition of done and the different stages that the item goes through before it can be marked done, right? Do you guys agree? I want to make some recommendation to bring transparency in our board. Are you guys kind of like open to experimenting and changing things up a bit? And so, every team has a different workflow because of the specific product they're building or the organization, they're in, and their own definition of done. So,
gotcha.
When I started with my current teams, they had 3 columns: active, in progress, and done.
Oh, wow.
And so when we would come to conduct a daily scrum, it was just really hard to know the progress. Like, is it still in development? Like, what about testing? I could see that the team wasn't collaborating around the remaining work to get done, since almost every items in our sprint were just glued to this one column in progress for like that entire sprint, right?
Wow.
So, so then I first check in with the team to make sure they really understand the intent behind why I'm recommending maybe a change, right? I'm not saying that like what they had in place isn't effective. I really want them to understand. So I sit with them and say, hey team, what are the different stages that a product backlog item in our sprint backlog must go through to get it to done? And I take that information and visually help the team represent in their workflow on the Scrum board.
Gotcha.
And what I've seen is the visualization of different stages gives the team member, some valuable insight into the development team's work that they never had before. They start to look for stages in their workflow that are like bottlenecks. And it also allows me as a Scrum Master to see a pattern of a product backlog getting stuck in a certain column, and how can I maybe, work through, that problem, as we learn about certain, blockers, right? And so what I've learned as a after a few sprints, it was taking average of 3 days for a user story to move from in coding to be available in testing environment, due to the fact that we were waiting on another team outside of us to make the views available in that environment where it needed to be tested, right? So, bringing that kind of transparency in the team's workflow made it clear that someone in our team needed access to push our own changes, right?
Wow.
So, yeah. As a Scrum Master, it's just like my responsibility to ensure that the team continuously updates the sprint backlog to reflect the changes that need to take place in the sprint. But before that can happen, do we have a visual, view of our workflow, and do we know where things are really getting stuck, right? And what can I do to help bring changes so that we can move forward? So